It was a cold morning in Winterfell, colder than usual, even for the north. The snow had just started falling, light and soft, covering the stone paths like white dust. Lord Eddard Stark stood at the godswood, looking at the old weirwood tree with its red leaves and white bark. His face was calm, but his eyes were full of storm. Jon Snow was leaving for the Wall that day. The boy, no, the young man, had grown under Ned's roof like one of his own. But he wasn't, not truly. And for years, Ned had carried a truth that burned inside him like wildfire. Robb Stark, just 17, walked into the godswood quietly. His father had asked to see him alone. No guards, no maester, not even Catelyn. That alone was enough to make Robb uneasy. "You wanted to see me, father?" he asked, his breath forming clouds in the air. Ned nodded slowly. "Aye, there is something I must tell you. Something no one else knows. Not even your mother." Robb furrowed his brow. "Is this about Jon?" Ned turned to look at his son. The boy was turning into a man fast, strong, smart, and loyal. But was he ready for this burden? "Yes, it's about Jon, about who he really is." Robb stepped closer, suddenly alert. "What do you mean?" "He's our brother, your son, isn't he?" Ned's jaw tightened. He looked down for a moment, then back into his son's eyes. "No, he is not my son. He never was." The words hit Robb like a hammer. His mouth fell open, but no sound came. His father, the man he trusted more than anyone, was telling him that Jon was not his brother. "Then whose son is he?" Robb asked, barely able to get the words out. Ned breathed deeply. "His mother was my sister, Lyanna," Robb's heart pounded. "But everyone says Rhaegar Targaryen took her. That he didn't rape her," Ned said sharply, cutting him off. "They loved each other. They were married in secret. Jon's real name is Aegon Targaryen. He's the true-born son of Rhaegar and Lyanna." Silence followed. Only the sound of falling snow filled the air. Robb stood frozen, not from the cold, but from the weight of this truth. "Why are you telling me this?" Robb whispered. "Because you need to know, before everything changes. War is coming, Robb. Robert is planning to kill all Targaryens. If he ever finds out who Jon truly is, he'll kill him," Robb finished, his voice hard. "Even though he's just a boy." "A good one," Ned nodded. "Aye, that's why I kept it secret. But I can't carry it alone anymore. And if anything happens to me, someone must protect Jon. You must." Robb's face hardened. He was still young, but in that moment he stood like a lord. "I swear it," he said. "No one will ever harm him. Not while I live." Ned placed a hand on his shoulder. "Good, but remember, this secret can start wars. If the wrong ears hear it, everything will burn." Robb nodded, but inside his mind raced. Jon Snow was not his brother. He was the last dragon. And if people found out, the war wouldn't just be for the North or the throne. It would be for blood, revenge, and the right to rule all of Westeros. Later that day, Jon left for the Wall, unaware of the storm his truth had awakened. Robb watched him ride off, his heart heavy with knowledge. Jon had always wanted to be a Stark, but in truth, he was more than that. He was a Targaryen, and that changed everything. The North was still, but inside Robb Stark's chest, a war had already begun. After Jon left for the Wall, Robb couldn't sleep. He kept turning in his bed, the candlelight flickering shadows across the walls. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw Jon's face, young, calm, full of honor, and now full of lies too. Not his own lies, but lies the world had forced on him. Lies that Ned Stark had carried like a sword over his heart for nearly 2 decades. Jon Snow wasn't a Snow. He wasn't even a Stark. He was a Targaryen. Robb whispered the name to himself. Aegon Targaryen. It felt strange on his tongue, like speaking an enemy's name. The same family whose prince had killed Elia Martell, murdered her children. The same Targaryens the North had followed into fire and blood centuries ago, then later helped overthrow. And yet, Jon didn't feel like an enemy. He never had. He had bled beside Robb during sparring, laughed with him by the hearth, and shared secrets only brothers shared. He was Robb's first friend, his shadow during boyhood, the one who always looked like he was carrying a storm inside, but never let it break. How could someone so full of sorrow be heir to fire and power? Robb sat up, running his hand through his hair. His heart was torn in too many directions. If his father had told the truth, Jon was the rightful heir to the Iron Throne. Not Robert Baratheon, not even Stannis. Jon, a boy raised as a bastard. Now the blood of the dragon and the wolf. And only Robb knew. He walked the halls of Winterfell late that night, candles dim and air cold as ghosts. He passed old portraits of Stark ancestors, their painted eyes watching him like judges. He ended up back at the Godswood, the place where truth had broken his world apart just a day ago. He kneeled before the weirwood tree and looked into its face. "Am I strong enough to carry this?" he whispered. There was no answer. The next morning, Robb wore his leather armor tighter, his expression harder. He joined his father in the great hall, where a raven had arrived from the capital. Robert wanted Ned to ride south, to be Hand of the King. The moment had come. Robb stood silently beside his father as the letter was read aloud. Lady Catelyn looked displeased, but she kept her words guarded. The bannermen muttered among themselves. But all Robb saw was the weight behind the words. If father went south, he might not return. That night, Robb knocked on his father's door. Ned opened it, surprised. "Robb." "I need to speak with you," Robb said. His voice didn't sound like his own. It was older, firmer, like the voice of a lord. "Alone." Ned let him in. The room smelled of parchment and old wood. Candles burned low. A map of Westeros lay stretched on the table. Ned sat down slowly. Robb remained standing. "If you go to King's Landing," Robb said, "you may not come back." Ned sighed. "I know the risk. And what happens if you die? What happens to Jon? To his secret?" Ned's eyes narrowed. "That's why I told you. So you can protect him. But what if I need help to do that?" Robb stepped forward. "What if we could do more than protect him? What if we could change everything?" Ned looked sharply at him. "What do you mean?" "Jon has a claim, a true one. He could be more than just safe. He could lead, maybe even rule." Ned's voice became stern. "No, he must never know who he is. Not yet. He is not ready. The world is not ready." Robb clenched his fists. "Then when?" "When he's dead. When the whole realm turns against him. Father, you raised me to speak truth and protect our blood. If Jon is blood of mine, I won't let the world burn him." "You speak like a man, but think like a boy," Ned said quietly. "You don't know the cost of crowns, Robb. People kill for them, lie for them, and die for them. I will not place that burden on Jon, but you've placed it on me," Robb said. His voice cracked just a little. "And I have to carry it. Alone." That silenced the room. Ned looked away, his jaw tight. The fire crackled. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "But there are some truths that break men. You must be stronger than me, Robb. You must carry this for him." Robb nodded stiffly and turned to leave. But before stepping out, he paused. "If anything happens to you," he said without looking back, "I won't let Jon stay in the dark forever. He deserves to know who he is. No matter what it costs." Ned said nothing. When Ned left Winterfell for King's Landing, Robb stood at the gates in silence. Jon was already gone to the wall, miles beyond reach. Catelyn stayed cold toward Robb that day. She always hated how close he was to Jon. If she ever knew the truth, she might hate him even more. As Robb watched the Stark party ride south, something inside him changed. He was no longer just the young heir to Winterfell. He was a keeper of dragons, a guardian of a secret that could shatter kingdoms. And in the days to come, when news would arrive of Ned Stark's arrest and whispers of war would fill the air, Robb Stark would rise not just as a son seeking justice, but as a brother ready to defy the world to protect the last Targaryen. To defy the world to protect the last Targaryen. The raven arrived just after dawn. Its feathers were wet with rain, and its message was stained with blood. Eddard Stark had been arrested, charged with treason. The capital claimed he plotted against King Joffrey, that he questioned the boy's right to the throne, that he'd tried to steal the crown for Stannis Baratheon. Robb stared at the letter, his hands trembling, not with fear, but rage. The hall at Winterfell was full of shouting men. Lords and bannermen from the north had gathered to hear the news, and chaos had followed. Catelyn was pale and shaking, her mouth tight, her eyes darting between her son and Maester Luwin. "This is madness." Great John Umber roared. Treason? Ned Stark wouldn't speak treason if the Mad King rose from the grave. They've taken your father, boy, said Rickard Karstark, voice sharp with fury. Will you sit here while the Lannisters spit on your house? Robb stood still for a moment, then looked up slowly. His voice was calm, but cold enough to freeze the room. Call the banners. A silence fell over the great hall like a heavy snow. Catelyn stepped forward. Robb, he turned to her. They've taken our father, our liege lord. If we do nothing, he dies. If we ride south, we may die too, but we won't die kneeling. The men in the hall roared their approval. The North would march. But inside Robb's mind, another war was raging. His father was gone, taken by politics and lies. Jon was far away on the wall, unaware of the blood in his veins or the knives surrounding his name. And Robb, he stood between them, the only one who knew the truth that could tear the realm apart. As the banners were raised and armies prepared, Robb sat in the quiet of his chambers that night, looking at a folded piece of parchment. It wasn't the Raven's message. It was the letter his father had written for him before leaving Winterfell. He unfolded it slowly. Robb, if you read this, then war has likely come. I've taught you steel, but not enough patience. You are strong, but remember, strength means little without honor. Protect your siblings, protect your people, and above all, protect the truth. One day Jon may need to know who he is, but not while it makes him a target. Use the truth as a shield, not a sword. Eddard Stark-Robb clenched his jaw. His father had always believed in mercy and patience. But mercy had gotten him arrested. Patience might get him killed. Robb wasn't his father. He would do what needed to be done. The War Council was held 3 days later. The Northern Lords gathered around a large map of Westeros. Pieces of carved wood marked armies, castles, and roads. We'll march south, meet with the River Lords, and break the Lannisters at the Trident, said Rose Bolton. His voice was calm, unreadable, like a snake warming itself under a rock. We should take Casterly Rock itself, shouted Great Jon, slamming his hand on the table. Let the lions know we're not sheep to be sheared. Robb kept silent until all had spoken. Then he stood and pointed at a small piece near Harrenhal. We don't have the numbers to take their strongholds, but we can split their forces. Draw Jaime Lannister west with the River Lords and trap him. Bold, muttered Rose, but dangerous. Robb's eyes locked on him. War is always dangerous, but we're not just fighting for honor. We're fighting for survival. The men nodded. Plans were set. Swords would cross. Blood would spill. But in the deepest part of Robb's mind, another thought was growing like wildfire. What if this war ended not with a northern king, but with a new Targaryen rising from the ashes? That night Robb stood on the battlements of Winterfell. Grey Wind paced beside him, restless. The direwolf sensed it too. Change was coming, and it carried blood on its breath. Catelyn joined him, wrapped in a thick cloak. You've grown, she said softly. Robb didn't answer. I still remember the first time you held a wooden sword. You cried when Jon beat you. He smiled faintly. I don't remember crying. You did, she said, smiling too. But you got up. Again and again. That's who you are. Robb turned to her. Mother, do you ever wonder about Jon? But why father brought him back from the war? Her face changed. Why are you asking that? I just think there's more to it than we know. Her voice turned cold. He is Ned's mistake. Nothing more. Robb looked away. Maybe not. Don't waste time on him, she said sharply. Your father is a prisoner. Your brothers are scattered. You are the Stark in Winterfell now. Act like it. She left him alone in the dark, but the words stayed. Don't waste time on him. But Robb would. Because Jon wasn't just some mistake. He was a prince. A hidden king, and Robb had sworn to protect him. As the northern host rode out days later, Winterfell behind them and war ahead, Robb Stark carried more than swords and banners. He carried a secret that could end dynasties, a name hidden from the world, Aegon Targaryen. And if the world wanted war, Robb would give them war, but not just for vengeance or honor. He would reshape the realm for the brother the world called a bastard. And maybe, just maybe, crown him. The North had never seen such movement in a generation. Nearly 20,000 men marched south under Robb Stark's banner. The direwolf flew beside the leaping trout of House Tully as the North and Riverlands joined forces. And Robb, no longer just a boy of Winterfell, rode at the head, his sword ready, his voice steady, but his mind drowning every step of the horse. Every sound of clanking armor reminded him he was not only riding for justice anymore, he was riding for a throne that Jon didn't even know belonged to him. He thought often about Jon, his face, his voice, the way he always looked like he belonged everywhere and nowhere at once. On the wall now, dressed in black, surrounded by ice and strangers, carrying a name that wasn't his, living a life meant for someone else. Robb clenched his jaw harder with each passing day. He deserves more. He is more, but how could he fight 2 wars at once? One for his father, and one for a secret that could bring all 7 kingdoms crashing down. He began writing letters in the dark of his tent, letters never sent. Jon, if I told you who you really were, would you believe me? Would you still call yourself my brother? Or would the truth break something between us? The world called you a bastard, but they were wrong. You're the son of Rhaegar Targaryen. You have a right to more than you were given. One day you'll know, and I hope it doesn't destroy you. He folded that one and burned it. Like all the others, not yet. Their first real test came at the Whispering Wood, a trap set for Jaime Lannister. Robb stood above the hill, the mist curling around the trees like ghosts, whispering warnings. He listened closely to every word from his scouts, every sound carried by the wind. Rose Bolton stood beside him. "You split our forces thin." "I know," Robb said. "If your plan fails, the young wolf dies before he earns his name." Robb turned to him, eyes cold. "It won't fail." When night fell, they struck, silent, precise, like wolves cutting through sheep. Jaime's forces never saw them coming. By dawn, Robb walked into the clearing where the Kingslayer knelt in chains, his face bruised but still smirking. "You're the Stark boy," Jaime said, blood on his teeth. "You don't look like a wolf. You look like a scared pup in armor." Robb didn't rise to the bait. "You're lucky I'm not the boy your family thinks I am." Jaime's grin widened. "So you do have claws." He turned and walked away, leaving the Kingslayer to stew. But deep down, Robb knew something had shifted. The North had its first true victory. The Riverlands were free, and yet his mind kept circling back to the other war, the quiet one, because with Jaime in chains, Catelyn demanded he be used to bargain for Ned. But what if Ned was already gone? And worse, what if the crown was already looking for other dragons? That night, while his men drank and celebrated, Robb sat outside his tent sharpening his blade. Grey Wind lay nearby, growling at every movement in the dark. Catelyn approached quietly. She always had the ability to appear at the worst moments. "You should be inside," she said. "Your men need to see their leader." "They can celebrate without me," Robb replied. She looked at the blade in his hands, then at the boy turned lord before her. "You remind me of your father." Robb didn't answer. "I know you've been carrying something more than this war," she said, her voice soft. "I see it in your eyes. The weight, the silence." Robb froze. Did she know? "You don't have to carry it alone," she added. He looked up, his face hard. "Don't I?" Catelyn stepped closer. "What is it, Robb? What has you looking at shadows when you should be leading your men?" He stood slowly. "There are truths, Mother, that can change the world. Break it even, then don't speak them," she said quickly. "Keep them buried, like your father did with Jon." That name again, she saw it in his face. "You're thinking of him, aren't you?" Robb stayed silent, her expression twisted. "He's not your concern, Robb. He never was." "He's my brother," Robb snapped. "No, he is Ned's mistake. And when you wear a crown, you don't carry bastards. You cut them loose." Those words stayed in the air like poison. Robb stared at her like she was someone else entirely. "If I ever wear a crown," he said, voice low, "I'll wear it because I carried what others chose to throw away." He walked past her, into the darkness, Grey Wind following close behind. A week later, word reached the camp. Ned Stark was dead, beheaded on the steps of the Great Sept, executed like a criminal. The men wept. The North shook. And Robb Stark stood still, jaw tight, eyes dry, while the world around him cracked. The lords wanted vengeance. We will march on King's Landing. We'll burn the Lannisters. We'll name Robb king in the north. But inside Robb, something else had already shifted. King. He didn't want a crown. He wanted justice. But maybe justice wasn't in the north anymore. Maybe it was across the wall. In the blood of a boy raised as a bastard, a boy who didn't even know he had a claim stronger than any Baratheon, stronger than Joffrey, stronger than Daenerys, a boy named Aegon Targaryen, and if Robb Stark had to wear a crown to protect him, he would, even if it meant tearing down the realm that murdered his father. They called him king in the north now. The swords of the northern lords clanged together beneath a sky heavy with ash and wind. In the hall of Riverrun, the air smelled of steel, sweat, and something new, fear mixed with faith. The last time the North had a king was 100 years ago, but this time they crowned a boy whose father had just died a traitor's death, a boy who'd won one battle, captured one lion, and now wore the weight of thousands. Robb Stark stood as the cheers filled the air. He didn't smile. He didn't bow. He didn't even raise his sword in thanks. His eyes were hard, distant, watching the fire in the torches more than the men who chanted his name, because Robb wasn't thinking of the throne he'd just accepted. He was thinking of the one that truly belonged to Jon. Somewhere far north, beyond frozen walls and forgotten castles, Jon still wore black, still believed he was a bastard. Still had no idea that every throne in Westeros could be his by birthright. Robb clenched his jaw as his bannermen chanted around him, "The king in the north!" The lie was growing louder. That night, after the hall emptied, Robb sat alone with Maester Luwin, deep in Riverrun's quietest chamber. The old Maester poured wine, then took out a sealed letter. "You asked me to prepare it," he said, placing it gently on the table. Robb looked down at the parchment. It was sealed with Stark wax. The words inside would change everything. It was a letter to the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch, to Lord Commander Jeor Mormont. "There is something you must know about Jon Snow. The secret is not mine to give, but the danger is real. He must be watched, not for weakness, but for what he carries inside him. If word ever reaches the south of who he is, the Watch may not be strong enough to protect him. Burn this after reading. Robb Stark, King in the North." Robb hadn't signed it with King in the North for pride. He signed it to make sure someone believed him, believed that what he was saying wasn't drunken madness or grief-talking. It was truth. Maester Luwin looked hesitant. "You're placing a great trust in Lord Mormont." "I served with him," Robb said. "He fought with my grandfather. He's loyal. If anyone can keep Jon safe, it's him. You're taking a risk, Robb." Robb stared at the flickering candlelight. "It's a greater risk not to warn him." Maester Luwin nodded. "Shall I send it with a trusted raven?" "Yes, and no other copy. No record in the castle ledgers." He watched the Maester leave. When the door shut, Robb leaned back in the chair and whispered into the darkness, "You don't know it, Jon, but I'm already fighting your war." In the weeks that followed, Robb's victories continued. He routed the Lannister forces at Oxcross, sent Sir Stafford's army fleeing like scared dogs. The North and Riverlands bled, but they believed. They believed in Robb Stark, the young wolf, but for Robb, victory was no longer enough. He had begun to plan something deeper, a future where Jon Snow could return not just as a brother, but as a dragon reborn. He began asking his men quiet questions. Which houses had ties to the old Targaryens? Which ones had once served Rhaegar before Robert's rebellion? He learned that House Dane in the south had once called Rhaegar their prince. That House Velaryon, though mostly in ruins, still remembered the dragon bloodline. That the old fire still lingered in pockets of Westeros, hidden, silent, waiting, but speaking it openly would mean death. So Robb kept his inquiries hidden beneath war talk. To his men, he was preparing for battle, but in truth, he was mapping the path for a forgotten heir. Then came the message from Castle Black. Jon Snow had gone beyond the wall, ranging with Lord Commander Mormont. Deep into the wilds, gone. Robb read the message 3 times. Not because he didn't believe it, but because he did. "He's gone," Robb whispered, "beyond the wall." He stepped out of his tent that night into a cold rain and looked up at the stars. They were hidden behind clouds. The world felt colder than it had ever been. Of course he would go, he muttered to himself. Of course he'd disappear just when the realm needs him. Grey Wind whined beside him, sensing the unease. Robb had expected to move in secret, to protect Jon from the south, from the Lannisters, from the lords who'd kill him if they ever learned his name. But now Jon had gone into a different world, a world of shadows, wildlings and ice, a world where his birthright meant nothing, but where his blood still mattered, and Robb couldn't follow him. He could win the south. He could capture kings and defeat armies, but he couldn't cross the wall. He couldn't reach his brother. All he could do now was keep the realm busy with war, keep the crown distracted, keep the Lannisters bleeding, and buy time. Time for Jon to return, time for Jon to rise, or time for Jon to die beyond the snow. Either way, Robb knew one thing for certain. If the world ever learned that the last Targaryen wasn't across the sea with a baby dragon queen, if they ever learned that the true heir wore black, carried a sword, and called himself Snow, the war would not be for thrones, it would be for history itself. The war was changing. It wasn't just steel and blood anymore. It was lies, secrets, whispers, intents, and looks that lasted a moment too long. Robb Stark could feel it. The North still followed him, yes, but their eyes were different now. Not all of them saw a king. Some saw a boy who had risen too fast. Others saw something else entirely. It began with small things. A letter from White Harbor arrived later than it should have. Lord Wyman Manderley's reply was colder than expected, his words full of flattery, but empty of promise. Then the Glovers pulled their forces back to defend Deepwood Motte without warning. No anger, no defiance, just quiet disobedience. Robb noticed every shift. His orders were followed, but no longer with fire. His victories were celebrated, but no longer with pride, and he began to suspect why. Someone was whispering. Someone was spreading poison behind his back. In the war tent, Robb sat late into the night, staring at maps he no longer trusted and messages that meant less with every raven. Rose Bolton entered, always like a ghost. Quiet, polite, unreadable. "My lord," he said, bowing slightly. "Bad news from the Neck. The Crannog men were ambushed. A scouting party was captured. One man survived. Said he heard talk of a prince." Robb looked up sharply. "What?" Bolton's eyes flicked across the table. "He claimed the Lannister men spoke of a rumor. A hidden Targaryen. In the north." Robb's heart dropped. His mouth dried instantly. "I thought all the Targaryens were across the sea," Rose continued casually, his voice like oiled leather. "But soldiers talk. And someone, somewhere, is planting seeds." Robb leaned back slowly. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword, but his mind raced. Was it Catelyn? No, she'd never speak of Jon that way, not even to tear him down. Was it Theon? No, he was gone, returned to Pike to seek his father's ships that hadn't come. So who? Robb met Roos's gaze and forced calm into his voice. "Rumors are just that. The Lannisters would whisper anything to divide us." "Indeed," Rose said. "And yet, some in your camp are listening." He turned and left before Robb could answer. Grey Wind growled low behind him, as if sensing the rot growing in the room. The next day, Robb rode alone to a quiet stream. He needed distance, time to think. Grey Wind followed, ever loyal. The water ran clear and cold, just like home. But Robb no longer felt like a boy of Winterfell. He dismounted, removed his gloves, and washed his face in the icy stream. "You should not be here alone," came a voice from behind. "Catelyn?" He didn't turn. "I needed air." She dismounted quietly and stood beside him. "You don't trust your council anymore." "Should I?" he asked. "You don't eat. You don't sleep. You question every message, every rider." Robb stood and finally looked at her. "Someone is speaking about Jon, about the truth." She went pale and he saw it. "Just for a second. You know something," he said, voice hard. "I said nothing," she whispered. "But you told someone," he said. "Who?" She shook her head. "It was before Before Ned died, I was angry. I said something about your father protecting Jon too much, about how it was always suspicious, how he never told even me who the mother was. Robb stepped back. Who did you say it to? I don't know, she admitted. I was drunk, tired, maybe one of the Frey girls, maybe Sir Cleos. I don't remember. He stared at her and the pain in his chest turned cold. My father trusted you with his life, he said, and you gave away the one thing he asked to protect. He never trusted me with the truth, she shouted. He never trusted me with anything when it came to that boy. Robb mounted his horse. Then you've proved him right. He rode away, leaving her standing by the stream, shaking, silent. That night, Robb wrote a second letter to Castle Black. This time he didn't warn. He begged. Jon, you don't know what you are, but others might. The South is not safe. The war is no longer just about father. It's about you now. Be careful. Trust no one. Even the Night's Watch has eyes that don't belong to you. If you ever make it back, we have much to speak of. But until then, keep your sword sharp. Robb folded the letter and gave it to Maester Luwin personally. This must go to Jon, no one else, Luwin bowed. You have my word. But even as he watched the raven fly off into the black sky, Robb wasn't sure it would reach. And even if it did, maybe it was already too late. In the coming weeks, the tension in camp thickened. A few more houses pulled back their forces. The Mallisters started speaking in private groups. Lord Karstark's men muttered about how Robb didn't burn the Lannisters fast enough, and Lord Roose Bolton. He smiled more now. That was the most dangerous sign of all. Robb sat in his tent one evening and stared at his sword. He had won battles, broken armies, crowned himself king. But the war behind the war, the one that lived in whispers and secrets, he was losing that one. He had fought so hard to protect Jon's name. And now the name was slipping beyond his control. He thought of Jon standing on top of the wall, staring into the endless white. Does he feel it too? Robb wondered. Does he feel that something is coming? For all of us? The cold, the lies, the truth, the storm of fire and blood was always going to come from inside. That's what made betrayal so fatal, not a sword swung by an enemy, but a secret whispered by a friend. The camp near the twins buzzed with activity. Tents flapped under grey skies, banners fluttered in a tired wind, and the smell of old meat, wet horses and mud clung to the air. Robb Stark stood above it all, watching from a ridge. He had been fighting 2 wars from the moment he left Winterfell, one with steel, the other with silence. And now, the silence was starting to scream. Roose Bolton had sent a raven just yesterday, unsolicited, Robb noted, to the Dreadfort. The message was sealed, but Robb had learned by now that secrets rarely stayed locked. Lady Maege Mormont had warned him in hushed tones the night before. The Bolton dogs are sniffing deeper than most. And then there were the Freys. Lord Walder had agreed to give them passage, yes, but there was something else now. A delay excuses a change in tone. His daughters and grandsons eyed Robb like he was a deer with a limp. Something was off, and it started with a name no one should have known. Targaryen. 2 nights later, the trap began to spring. Robb had called a meeting in the command tent to prepare for the next move against Casterly Rock. Most of the northern lords were there: Bolton, Karstark, Mormont Serwyn and 2 Freys, Sir Ryman and Black Walder. The map was spread before them. Robb pointed to the river routes. If we strike the supply lines here, Black Walder interrupted, his voice low and lazy. You sound more like a lion than a wolf these days. Always circling, never biting. The tension in the tent tightened. Robb stared at him. You've got something to say, Sir Walder? He asked calmly. The man smirked. Only that some of us wonder what you're really fighting for. Justice for your father, sure. But that war ended with Ned Stark's head. This one, it feels like something else. Karstark grunted in agreement. I've lost 2 sons, Your Grace. The Lannisters still breathe. Yet you hesitate. I hesitate, Robb said carefully, because the war isn't just about revenge anymore. Then what is it about? Roose Bolton asked quietly, though he already knew the answer. Robb said nothing. Because if he spoke the truth, he'd lose every sword in the room, but someone else was willing to speak it for him. "He's protecting a Targaryen," Blackwalder said, voice loud now. "That's what this war's about." The words hit the room like thunder. Robb's hand went straight to his sword, but he didn't draw. He looked around. Faces pale. Others shocked, some knowing. "Where did you hear that name?" Robb asked, voice low. But he already knew. Someone had spoken. Someone had broken the circle of silence he had fought to protect. Blackwalder didn't flinch. "Some say the young wolf is guarding a dragon, a secret prince raised in the north, hidden as a bastard. They say this prince has a stronger claim to the Iron Throne than all of them." Karstark leaned forward. "Jon Snow." Roose Bolton tilted his head, watching Robb with the same interest a butcher has before he picks the right knife. Sir Ryman Frey shifted uncomfortably. "If this is true, Lord Stark, you've been hiding it from your bannermen." Lady Mormont's hand hovered near her axe. "Are you all mad? You want to chase rumors and fairy tales while the Lannisters sharpen their blades?" But it was too late. The poison had been released, and now it was moving fast. Robb looked them all in the eye. "What if it were true?" he said suddenly. "What if Jon wasn't a bastard? What if he was the son of Prince Rhaegar and my Aunt Lyanna? You mean to put a Targaryen on the throne?" Karstark spat. "After all, we lost fighting against them." Robb's voice rose. "You lost sons fighting for a cause that ended in madness. I'm talking about a man raised as a Stark, a man with honor, with strength, with claim. He is more worthy of the throne than Joffrey, than Stannis, than Daenerys across the sea, but not more worthy than you," said Roose. The room went still again. Robb looked down at the map. "I never wanted a crown," he said. "I wanted justice. I wanted peace. But if protecting Jon means war, then I will wear the crown and burn the throne itself if I must." He turned to Blackwalder. "But make no mistake. If one more man in this room speaks his name where they shouldn't, I'll feed you to Grey Wind," the direwolf growled from the shadows. Blackwalder paled, but Robb knew it didn't matter any more. The secret was out. That night, Robb rode out alone. He didn't go far, just into the woods, into the darkness. He dismounted and sat beneath an old tree. Grey Wind paced near him, uneasy. "It's slipping away," Robb whispered. He thought of Jon standing on the ice, looking up at stars, unaware that every noble house was now sniffing for dragon blood. The Lannisters, the Freys, even the Boltons. They'd stop at nothing to kill Jon if they believed he could take the crown from their hands. "I failed you," he whispered. "I tried to protect you. I buried the truth so deep and still. They dug it up." Grey Wind whimpered. Robb looked at the sky. "If I die, Jon, you'll be hunted. They'll come for you. They'll use your blood like a banner or a sword, or both." He drew his blade and rested it on the grass. "Gods forgive me," he whispered. "But if I have to kill every man between you and the Iron Throne, I will." The wind shifted, far away, across snow and stone and silence. The wall stood tall. Beyond it, Jon Snow lived still, unaware that the world had begun to sharpen its knives for him. The sky above the twins was blood red. A storm was coming, but the air was too still, like the world was holding its breath. Robb Stark rode through the gates of House Frey, with his head held high, and Grey Wind pacing at his side. His bannermen followed closely behind. Catelyn rode with him, silent. Her eyes had grown sharper ever since the whispers began. The Red Wedding was days away, but Robb didn't know it yet. Not completely, but he felt something. A chill that armor couldn't protect against. A silence between allies that used to laugh beside him. The uneasy weight of the truth slipping out of his hands. Jon Snow's name had become a shadow that followed him into every room. Lord spoke it with questions in their eyes, some with fear, others with hunger, and behind every question stood Roose Bolton. The feast was loud but cold, roast meat, stale bread, and jugs of watered wine. The musicians played, the Frey girls danced, and Lord Walder Frey smirked behind his crusted beard. Surrounded by his sickly sons, Robb raised his cup, gave thanks, toasted the union between his Uncle Edmure and the Frey girl, but inside, he was already planning an escape. He had seen it on the ride in, the closed gates behind him, the too many guards, the way the wine never stopped flowing. He leaned toward his mother. "Something's wrong," she nodded once. Her fingers never left the hilt of her knife. Then the music changed, the doors shut, and the arrows began to fly. Chaos, screaming, betrayal. The Northmen were butchered where they stood. Swords cut down lords who had followed Robb since the first call to arms. Tables overturned, men fell into fire. Blood painted the floor. Catelyn stabbed a Frey girl before a crossbow bolt split her throat. Robb, wounded, stumbled toward the dais. Grey wind howled from outside the walls, trapped, raging, dying. Roose Bolton approached. His blade was clean, too clean. "You knew," Robb said, blood dripping from his lips. "You planned this." Roose didn't blink. "The North chose a boy as king. A boy who fights for a bastard. A Targaryen bastard." Robb's heart stopped in his chest. "So that was it. That's what this is about," he hissed. "He's my brother." "He's a threat," Roose replied. "Not to me, not to the Freys, to everyone. A boy with dragon's blood, raised in the snow, loved by wolves. If he ever raises a banner, the realm will burn for him. He doesn't even want a crown," Robb said, coughing blood. "He doesn't know the truth." "But you do," Roose whispered. "And that's enough." Robb reached for his sword, but Roose was faster. A dagger slid into Robb's heart, cold, quiet. As the life drained from his body, Robb's last thought wasn't of war or thrones or revenge. It was Jon standing on the wall, smiling faintly, a sword on his back. A name he didn't know, Aegon Targaryen, and then everything went black. Far north, beyond the wall, Jon Snow stood alone on a frozen cliff. Ghost was beside him, watching the dark woods below. The wind howled, but Jon felt warmer than usual. The weight in his chest had shifted, like something inside him had broken free. He didn't know, didn't know that his brother was dead, didn't know that the Red Wedding had spilled half the North in a single night, didn't know that Roose Bolton now ruled. Winter fell in his name, or that the Freys feasted on the corpses of his bannermen, but somehow he felt it. The bond between wolves ran deeper than blood, and something in his heart was burning. A week later, a raven arrived at Castle Black. Its message was smudged with snow and blood, but the seal was still visible, the direwolf of House Stark. "Maester." Aemon read it aloud. The room went quiet. Jon stared at the floor. "Robb is dead," Aemon said gently. "So is your lady mother. The North bleeds." Jon didn't speak. He walked out into the cold, armorless, swordless, and stared at the wall. "I should have been there," he whispered, but Ghost only watched him, eyes glowing in the dark. The world had changed again, but something inside Jon had begun to change too. That night, Jon took out the letter Robb had sent weeks earlier, the one Maester Aemon had nearly burned. Thinking it madness, he read the words over and over. "You don't know what you are, but others might. The South is not safe. This war isn't just for father anymore. It's for you. You're not just my brother, Jon. You're something more. And if I don't live long enough to say it in person, know this: you have a right to be more than a sword in the snow. The fire is in you. The truth will find you. And when it does, don't run from it. I never bent the knee for you, but I would have." Jon folded the letter slowly. Something in him stirred, something ancient, something royal, but also something angry. He whispered, "I don't want a crown," but the wind answered with a hiss. "It doesn't matter. Back in the South, as Roose Bolton claimed Winterfell and the Freys drank dry the bones of the North. Another raven flew. This one travelled west, across the sea, toward Dragonstone, to a queen with silver hair and 3 dragons. Inside was a single piece of parchment, written in a dead king's hand. It read, "Aegon lives," and the game began again, not with kings and thrones, but with names, with wolves, and with fire. Wolves, and with fire.